This video will show you how to complete a remote ID verification in FinTracker. Sometimes you're working with a client who, for whatever reason, cannot be physically present. For example, if they're in another country and they're working with you to find a property here. In that case, remote ID verification can be a great option to verify their identity. FinTracker's remote ID verification system uses artificial intelligence to verify and authenticate your client's identity entirely remotely. When you send a remote ID verification request, your client receives an email from FinTracker saying that you are requesting an ID verification in accordance with FinTrack legislation. The client logs in to FinTracker, and they just have to enter the issuing country of their ID, the type of ID they want to add, give permission for FinTracker to use their camera, and then scan the front and back of their ID. Then they use the device camera to scan their facial biometrics. FinTracker will use AI to verify the validity of the ID and analyze the client's facial biometrics to remotely authenticate both the ID and the identity of the client. This is obviously a great option when working with remote clients, but an important caveat is that it should only be used in those cases when the client cannot be physically present. Whenever possible, you should verify your client's identity in person. And you should note that remote ID verifications are a paid feature. That means that there is a cost associated with it. Each remote ID verification that you do costs 1 token. Members of Proptix boards receive 5 free tokens annually with the option of purchasing additional tokens in increments of 5 in the app. Scanning an ID in person is a free service. Only remote ID verifications have this cost associated with them. That being said, there are definitely times when your client is not physically present and you will need to use a remote ID verification. So let's take a look at how you would use this feature. From the FinTracker homepage, click on the plus icon in the top right-hand side of your screen if you're on desktop, or if you're in the app on the lower right-hand side of your screen. Select New Remote ID Verification. This new window will pop up. Enter your client's name, and then choose if you want to send the remote ID verification request via text message or email. If it's a text message, you'll enter the phone number. If it's email, then you'll have to enter the email address and then confirm it again. Then choose the language that you want to send the request in. And you can choose to add the remote ID verification to a new individual identification record or a receipt of funds. In this case, I'm going to add it to an individual ID identification record because I'm in the process of verifying my client's ID. I'm not going to attach it to a receipt of funds at this point because I'm doing this step early in the process and we don't have any offer at this stage. Remember, the earlier you can verify the client's ID, the better. Next, the system is just reminding us that each remote ID verification costs 1 credit. If the client lets the request expire, or if you cancel the request before the client can verify their ID, then you would get your credit back. Finally, click Send. Your client will then receive an email invitation to complete the remote ID verification. Now, on your client's end, there are some best practices for facial scanning so that they can obtain the best results. As mentioned, they will need to scan both their ID and their face. For the ID scan, they should ensure to take the scan in a well-lit area, making sure there is no glare on the ID. The ID should be on a solid background that is a contrasting color from the ID, and all characters should be visible. Avoid holding the ID for best results. This helps the scanner clearly read the ID. When scanning your face, you should be in a well-lit area. Look directly at the ID. Don't try to scan at an angle. Also, take the scan with a high contrast background. For example, don't take the photo in front of a bookshelf or cabinets. Once the client has completed their remote ID verification, you'll receive an email notification that it's been completed and whether or not it is approved. So it will contain the name of the client and the status of the verification record. And you'll also see that the email says that a new incomplete individual identification record for the client has been created in FinTracker, and it gets created in a new transaction kit in My Records. So your next step would be to then log back into FinTracker, locate the transaction kit, and finish the individual identification record for this client.